Good evening. I'm Vicki Hill, Vice Chair of Women of Colors. Welcome to It's Time to Have a Conversation. Tonight's conversation will focus on mental health and foster care, aging out of foster care. But before we get started, I just want to tell you just a little bit about Women of Colors. Women of Colors has been in existence for over 30 years now. Yeah, congratulations to us. We have been serving in our community without any interrupt in service whatsoever. Women of Colors has done so many different things in our community that we're very proud of the work that we've done. I want to just tell you about a couple of things that are coming up. All right. So we have introduced a very new program, and this new program is called Dress for Purpose. Now, this is for new young adults in training to dress for purpose. This is an 8-week workshop, and it's going to take place on October the 17th at 4:30 p.m. That will be our very first. So we'll have a link for you so that you can join in on that link if you'd like to be a part of this. Then, once again, Women of Colors has our Warm a Child for Winter, which is coming up in November the 11th. Now, this is where we give away hundreds and hundreds of coats to children from the age of newborn to 17 years of age. This will be a drive-through service as it has been in the past 3 years. It will be held at the Success Academy, which is located at 1000 Tuscola right here in the city. Now, listen, you do need a referral form. This referral form helps us to go out and shop for your children's coats that we need to get for you. It also, we will get that form from you. We'll take it inside the building. We're going to fill your order. So it's important that you put down each child's name, their age, and their size. Because when we walk inside that building, we want to come out with the correct size for your child. All right. It's on a first come, first serve basis. So I encourage you to make sure that you are there early. Okay. Because when they run out, they just run out. We try to do our best to serve everyone, but we need you to be there early to participate if you need a coat. If you don't need that coat and you know someone who does, please, by all means, share this information. It is November the 11th at the Success Academy, 1000 Tuscola Street, right here in the city of Saginaw. Now, listen, you don't just get a coat, so come on out. You're going to get coat, hats, gloves, and whatever else we may have. We do partner up with the church, South 17th Church, and they always give out great toiletries, a bag full. So you don't want to miss this event. We are glad to help in our community. As I always say, we are loving our community from the inside out. Now I want to introduce you to our host today. Our host today is going to be Miss Crystal Sanders. Crystal has been a member of Women of Colors for about 14 years now, and she's going to be hosting this today, and I will kind of be her co-host. So welcome. Hi, Crystal.
Hello. Thank you so much, Vicki, for the very kind introduction. And welcome to all of our remote viewers and our panelists. I would like to introduce you now to some of the other members of our panel this evening who are going to have a great deal to say about the topics that we're going to cover. So first, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Kai Anderson, and she's going to say a little bit about herself and let you get to know her better.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me, Vicki and Crystal.
You're welcome.
I'm a psychiatrist associated with Central Michigan University Medical Education Partners. I've been here in Saginaw, my new home, since 2017. I'm loving it here. I see children, adults in this area, and I have a special interest in working with children and adults that have experienced trauma.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Kai, for joining us this evening. Alan Stamps, I'm going to get that right. Would you please introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about River Jordan and why you joined us tonight?
Okay, so I'm founder and CEO of River Jordan, and we provide wraparound support services that includes peer mentor support and life skill coaching services for current and former foster youth, starting at age 14 for life. We started in about 5 years ago, And so we've just been going strong ever since. And you know, my passion is because I am a former foster care. I grew up in the foster care system, went through 20 different placements and out of foster care, homelessness, and ended up going to prison and things like that. And it wasn't until later on in life where I found my pathway of recovery, and you know, I started River Jordan because I wanted to come back and help my foster brothers and sisters make it.
Wonderful. Okay, all right. Ooh, okay, sorry. I saw my mic was muted and I said, oh no, are they going to hear me? And our final panelist this evening is Sean Shutt. And he works with me at Underground Railroad, and I've been saying his name wrong for many years, so I've just been corrected over these last few days. And so, Sean, would you please share with our audience, what you do with Underground Railroad and why you're here this evening?
Yeah, so I'm Sean Shutt, the Community Engagement Intervention Manager for Underground Railroad. I've been with Underground Railroad for about 7 years now, just a little bit over that. A lot of my work ends up putting me in middle schools and high schools, teaching kids about consent, healthy relationships. I've worked with businesses on sexual harassment policies. I've worked with bars. I've helped educate local politicians. So anything related to preventing domestic and sexual violence, I'm going to try to have my foot in that, as well as I'm also the co-chair of the Mid-Michigan Human Trafficking Task Force.
Thank you to each of our panelists. Now, before we get into our deep dive conversation this evening, I just have a few things that I want to share with you tonight. During past Women of Colors, It's Time to Have a Conversation discussions, panelists have spoken about the challenges and vulnerabilities youth and adults with mental and physical challenges face. Tonight's conversation will address the challenges and vulnerabilities youth in and aging out of foster care face. Neither I nor anyone else on this panel this evening is suggesting that all youth in foster care experience mental and physical or any other type of challenges and vulnerabilities. But tonight we're here to address those that do. Now I also want to share a few statistics with you regarding children in foster care. In 2021, based on the information gathered in the 2021 Michigan Consensus, over 2,150,000 children under the age of 18 were in foster care. 65% were white, 16% were Black, and less than 20% were children of other races and ethnicities. The number one reason for children being placed in foster care is neglect. Children under the age of 1 are slightly higher than all other ages to be adopted. The total number of children waiting to be adopted whose parental rights have been terminated were 2,890. 44% of children are reunited with families. I mean, that is a good statistic, but we sure would like to see that, go higher. And I know that is typically the goal of the justice system, is to see, children be reunited with their families. 1,689 children were adopted. That's about 34%. And it is reported that the older a child is in foster care, the less likely they are to be adopted. Children may remain in foster care until the age of 18. Now, Aylent, my question for you this evening, or what I would like from you this evening is, because I have heard a bit of your story, can you expound on it a little bit and explain to our audience what led you to open River Jordan, and please state the services that you provide.
There I go.
There we go.
River Jordan, we provide wraparound support services for current and former foster youth, ages 14 to forever. And we do forever because recovery from trauma, recovery from, childhood trauma and mental health and stuff like that. That's a lifelong process. It's not a one and done. It's not something that you do in a week or a month or a year. It's something that you have to maintain. So that's why we have those services for a lifetime. As far as my history in foster care, like I say, I grew up in foster care. My mother was an addict. She wasn't abusive as far as physically, but she was neglectful. She didn't take me on her drug excursions, so she would leave me with people and say, "Hey, I'll be back. I'm gonna go to the grocery store. I'm gonna go around the corner real quick. I'll be back in 5 minutes," and we wouldn't see her for a day or two. And so enough of that happened to where someone had, found where my grandmother lived and dropped me off there, and then started reported it to CPS. CPS got involved, and they couldn't find my mother, and then so they opened up a foster care case, and the rest was history. And then I went through about 20 different placements and group homes. My mother, she tried as an addict, but uh, getting clean and recovery and finding a recovery often involves relapse. So I did a lot of going home and reunifying and then being put back in foster care because of relapse and stuff like that. So I went through a lot of that until I turned 18. My mother's parenting rights was finally taken from her when I was 14 years old. And then so I aged out of foster care at age 18, but it wasn't because there was no services there in place. I had a lot of opportunities that I could have taken advantage of. But by the time I turned 18, I didn't want anything to do with DHS. I didn't want anything to do with foster parents. I didn't want anything to do with any of it. I just wanted to get away. And so that's what I did. I got away. I aged out into homelessness, and then, hooked up with the wrong crowd, and, being a vulnerable teen, not knowing the streets. And, there's a lot of predators out there. And I aged out in the heart of the Cass corridor in Detroit, back in 1989. And so I hooked up with the wrong people. I got on the hard drugs, and, I started doing things to support my habit. And eventually, I got enough felonies to where, it landed me in prison for 5 years. And so, to make a long story short, I really didn't reach a point in my life where I really wanted to make a real change until I was in my 30s. I just saw the never-ending cycle, and trying to escape, not dealing with my recovery, and because when in recovery, you have to uncover, right? You have to get in there, you have to dig, and whatever you swept under the rug, you got to bring it back out. You got to deal with it, and I ran from that for a long, long time, until it just started, taking a toll on me and a toll on my mental health, and getting me to the point where I didn't want to live anymore, and it was just a wreck. And so that, along with my newfound relationship with God, is what brought me to a place of recovery. And once God had, worked with me, and and I found my pathway of recovery, I wanted to share it with everybody that's been in foster care. And then so I started working at an agency that had an independent living facility going on. It was a pilot program. And those kids, when I walked in there, it was like looking at a bunch of little me's running around there. They were all between 15 and 17, getting ready to age out. They're all scared. They don't know what to do. Parenting rights are taken, and all that kind of stuff. And they're acting out and doing all kinds of stuff. And I just said, wow, this is the same as it was when I was in foster care. This does not change because it's 2012. The same traumas, the same way we act out, the same, all of that stuff. And so I just fell in love with the idea of going in and helping young people not reach the age of 40 years old to suddenly make a change in their life and blow all kinds of opportunities leading up to that. So I'm just here, because I want to see, current and former foster youth thrive. I want to see them have healthy relationships. I want to see them love. I want to see them play. I want to see them, just have relationships with people, healthy relationships with people. I want to see them love themselves. I want to see them accomplish their goals and understand that they are good enough, and all those kind of things. And that's what we do here at River Jordan. And it's a process. We don't always feel good about ourselves, so we need a mentor. We need somebody who has been through it before. Not just going to see a social worker or a psychiatrist. They all have their place, but when you have a mentor that has been through it before, that can identify and relate, it's just a much, I can't explain that type of relationship, because I have those relationships with people now, in my substance use recovery. I have people like that I can go to, and I can say things to them that most people would say I'm crazy, but they understand, right? And I can vent to them and stuff like that. So that's why I do what I do. I'm just very passionate about it. My goal is just to train up a whole bunch of foster care alumni to go in and do the same thing I'm doing.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for your transparency this evening. But in hearing what you shared, a couple of questions came to mind. I know Underground Railroad, we can serve minor youth from I think it's 14 to 17, but most actually they can receive a few services over a period of maybe it's 6 visits over a certain period of time, that they don't need parental or guardian consent. You mentioned that you serve youth 14 to 17. I trust most of these youth do not have parental or guardian permission or consent. Are these youth emancipated? How is it that you are actually able to serve these youth?
Well, we have a direct partnership with Department of Health and Human Services all over our region. So we serve 8 counties in this region, and Wayne County as well. So they send referrals, and then we're able to go in there and do what we need to do to help these youth navigate through foster care. And also, it's just building the relationships that we built, the trust that we built, between DHS, foster parents, and and the like.
All right, thank you for that. And then also, Dr. Kai, we've had a recent conversation, and based on what Aylin shared, how do you feel that the court system factors in to the foster care system? And Aylin, if you want to share anything, I welcome you to share, because I know that, how maybe judges, attorneys, friend of the court, different individuals interact with the youth in foster care, with the foster care families and everything. How does that all factor in to either create a positive or maybe not so positive experience for youth in foster care?
Well, I'd like to start off by saying that prior to coming to CMU, I worked in Wayne County for what's called the Clinic for Child Study, which was a clinic that was directly associated with the Wayne County's juvenile court. And we had a team of psychiatrists. I was the only psychiatrist, several psychologists, several probation officers, also called clinical case managers, that work with these youth and these families. And our sole purpose was to make sure that the judges, the referees knew about this child, knew their struggles, knew the family struggles, and that the families and the child got the services that they needed. So I think that was an excellent example of a clinic partnering with the court to really understand what are some of the challenges the family and the youth experienced that led to them going to foster care, and what services they needed to help them to get out of foster care. And I think that is so important, because if you don't address the root cause, as Aylin said, that cycle is going to continue. You're never going to really address, why these children are in foster care. And that may mean that the parents have to get some help, and they may need to give them more chances than you think you should give them, because they may be struggling with chronic diseases and And having an addiction is a disease. It's not a choice. No one grows up saying, I want to be an addict. It is a disease.
Crystal, I have a question for Aylin, if you don't mind. So, Aylin, as I was listening to you and your story, I commend you for being as transparent as you have. I always believe when you tell your story, as we all have stories, when you share those stories, you're helping someone else that may be listening to this that we're doing right now. And it helps them to either survive, get through it, figure out a way that they can get through it. So, what I want to know, you started the River Jordan. Was it hard for you to get this started? Did you think about this concept of what you wanted to do while you were in prison or once you come out of prison? And then how hard was it for you to start this?
I didn't think about this when I was in prison. I actually thought about, opening up a Christian record label and having, a clothing line and all that kind of stuff and just doing music because that's what I love to do. Had no, but God knew what He purposed me to do, and it was not music. And so I guess what was the other part of the question?
Was it hard for you to start this organization? Did you have a lot of pushback? Did you get a lot of support to do it?
I got a lot of support to do it. God just kind of paved the way. The biggest hurdle was me. The biggest hurdle was me. Am I good enough to do this? Am I educated enough? Am I all that kind of stuff that a lot of us go through when we're doing something hard or doing something different. I tell you what is hard is when you are a trailblazer and you're doing something new. It's hard. Foster care peer support specialist program is new. So we got some pushback from that, but now after 5 years, we're seeing that road starting to open up wide for us, and we're being welcomed. And then some of the other concepts, foster care recovery, the need for a foster care recovery fellowship meeting, ongoing, those kind of things. All those things are new, and anytime you do something new, you're going to get pushback. And so that. Yeah, those are the challenges we face, but not so much anymore.
Thank you for that. I know someone who was in foster care, and from what I was told, he went from home to home to home, as so many do. And in doing so, it kind of really, we're talking about mental health and youth, and we're talking about aging out of foster care as well, but it played a big role in his mental state. Mm-hmm. So maybe not everyone comes out with problems, but there are so many who do come out with issues. And I'm taking it as because a lot of times it's because of what has happened to them in their lives, the separation from their parents, or maybe some of the things that might have happened within the different foster homes that they went to.
Well, 83% of youth that have experienced foster care has been diagnosed with some mental health disorder, whether it's light, moderate, or severe. So it's a very real thing that it happens to most all of us. And like Crystal said, it doesn't happen to all of us, but the vast majority is trauma. It's like when anytime you're pulled from your caregiver or something like that, it creates some kind of trauma, whether it's light, moderate, or severe. And there's a recovery process that has to go along with that, no matter how severe it is. And so that's what we're talking about here at River Jordan. We want to help all of those that have been through foster care and at least explore, is there some things in my life that I'm doing as a result of my foster care experience and my childhood trauma? Is there some things that I need to address? Let's at least explore that and evaluate that. And if there's not, that's fine. But if there is, we need to help them find their avenue of recovery.
Absolutely. And in my research, I found that there in Michigan, it's being reported that there are 13,000 youth that are currently in foster care. That's a lot.
Mhm.
It's a lot.
Absolutely, it is a lot.
And I really commend you for what you're doing, Aileen, because as you said, you have lived experience.
Mhm.
You've been through this, and that is so important for individuals to understand how they can learn from you and learn from your experiences. As a psychiatrist, I can provide counseling, I can provide information about how to heal from trauma, but it's totally different, when they talk to someone that has had lived experience. So I think the services you provide are unique and so valuable.
Absolutely.
And as a peer support, it's really important when you start that relationship with a young adult or a young kid that's 14. He's in foster care. He's just got yanked out of his home. What's normal to him or her is not normal to us. And they're like, they're mad at the world. They don't understand what's going on. They need someone who is a peer that has been through it before, and they can say, hey, this is what's going on, this is what's happening, this is this and that's that, and help them understand the process. A caseworker or DHS worker, a psychiatrist, or anybody like that, going in and talking to them are seen as like the police or somebody that is the problem. You're the problem. You're the reason why I got pulled out. You're the reason why my mom is in jail now. You're the reason, and all that kind of stuff. But when you got a peer that's going in there and saying, hey, your mom is on drugs and this is not cool, and and really helping them understand that, then they start to get a better picture of what's going on, and the peer support also helps form that relationship between the therapists and the case workers, and help create that trust, and they bridge the gap. So that's why peer support is so important.
Thank you.
Well, it's also interesting listening to you, Aylin, just kind of talking about that. Just a few weeks ago, I had been on a panel with someone else who had experienced human trafficking, and how they were talking about how important it was to have those who had experienced trafficking be involved in that process early, working with trafficking victims, because it's all the same reasons that you were pointing out, is lived experience experts. While, yeah, maybe they're not social workers, they're going to be the ones who know what that person at least somewhat has experienced, and be able to connect to them more to help them initiate the other services that they might need. Because you're right, like if I was experiencing something really bad and the cops show up and now my life's worse, yeah, they just made my life worse. They didn't help me out. So if you have that lived experience expert who can help guide them into those services, it just makes it that much more easy for them to be able to start their healing journeys from the trauma they've experienced.
Absolutely.
And Sean, I know that you work for the Underground Railroad. Tell us what you do at the Underground Railroad.
Yeah, so I do a lot of just presentations and trainings, working around trying to create a community where we see less violence take place. In part because if I'm trying to prevent domestic or sexual violence, I'm working to prevent all forms of violence, because I can't just isolate it to one, because all forms of violence are rooted in the same things, which is the desire for power and control over someone else. And those who are experiencing oppression in our communities tend to be the ones who are also at the greatest risk of experiencing that violence. So knowing that those things kind of overlap, any work that is being done to prevent violence is work that I can be involved in. So it's a really broad answer to the question of what I do, but really I can pretty much figure out a way to connect with anything to domestic or sexual violence prevention.
Perfect. Back to you, Crystal.
Wow, this has been a wonderful conversation so far, let me just say. But Aylin, I'm going to come back to you for a minute, and I'm going to jump in with Dr. Kai as well. And thank you for that, Sean. But you mentioned when you turned 18, you wanted to be done with the foster care system, anything related to the foster care system, DHHS, any system that had been in place in your life or in your past. It's like you wanted to put it behind you and move on. So as youth age out of foster care, do they still receive financial assistance, or do they have to prove there's a need, or are they expected to just go out and get a job? I mean, tell us about that.
So there are several different programs, and that's another thing that the peer support tries to do, working with the young person before they age out, is do not pass up all of these opportunities all these programs. We have the Youth in Transition Program, YT, which helps with money for car up to $5,000. Laptop computer helps with college tuition, helps with interview clothes, helps with first month rent and security deposit for an apartment, helps with $1,000 startup goods for the apartment. You have programs like young adult voluntary foster care, we call YBAC. That's $600 a month up until you turn 21. That pays for your apartment or pays for, your living situation or whatever, your phone, things like that. And all you have to do, the requirements are very minimal. You have to either be working part-time or going to school part-time or volunteering part-time. And the worker just needs to know your address so they can, come and see you once a month and lay eyes on you, making sure you're all right. They're not your worker in the sense that, when you were a minor, they're just kind of there just to check and make sure you're okay. And then you got the education and training voucher, and that helps with full college tuition, room and board, and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, when you turn about 14, 15 years old, and there's no chance of reunification or anything like that, they're scared. They're scared. And the closer they get to the door, the more scared they become and the more they start acting out, And as peer support, I keep going back to, I'm sorry, but as peer support, we can go in there and say, hey, we understand how you're feeling right about now. You're looking at the front door, you don't know what's going on, and you got these foster parents that when you turn 18, you can't live here anymore. As much as they love you, you can't live there anymore. And so you're right. There's a lot of benefits out there for them, but it's all about helping them line up with those benefits and valuing those benefits. And you know what, Crystal? Most of them come back. They get out there and they run wild for about a year or two, and then they come back after life's beat them down, and they come back and say, okay, now I want to figure out what these services are. And sometimes it's too late. Sometimes it's too late. Sometimes they've caught cases that, now they're going to prison for a few years, and, they get caught up in sex trafficking and human trafficking situations. 60% of youth that were rescued from sex trafficking were foster youth. They were runaways from foster care, or they were former foster youth. So we're just, at River Jordan here, we're just trying to, we do damage control. There's going to be some damage. We know that, but, because everybody's got to experience life, but we just try to help them bring it down to a minimum.
Aylin, I have another question. So you talked about your experience of being in the foster home, and we're talking about aging out of foster care. So my question is, before it's time for that person to age out, and I assume the age is around 18, am I right?
18, yes.
Okay. So before they're aging out, were you given choices? Were you provided with resources to take advantage of so that when you walked out of there, you were not homeless? You were not left to sleep in your cars or on the ground or wherever it was?
Absolutely. Yep. I was given a lot of choices. I was given a lot of programs that I could have taken advantage of. Now there's a whole lot more stuff available to foster youth right now, and those services start at 14 years old. That's why River Jordan starts our care at 14 years old. We want to be, if someone gets pulled out of foster care at 14 or older, we want to be that second or third call that CPS, they should be calling us and saying, yeah, we had to remove somebody. Can you come down to DHS and help us, get the situation under control? Can you help explain to the youth what's going on and stuff like that? We should be one of those first calls.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then that leads me to another question, because how old can a youth actually seek emancipation? Maybe parental rights even haven't been terminated, but they just don't want to be in the home anymore for whatever reason. At what age can they seek emancipation? Is there anybody that can answer that question?
14.
Okay.
In Michigan.
All right. Now, Dr. Kai, knowing what you do and how you have worked with youth, can you talk a little bit about the brain development of youth? Because I'm going to tell you, I wasn't in foster care. I didn't always make the right choices at 16, 17, 18 years old. And, I just didn't. And I can't go back and undo it. It's there. And it's like, why, Vicki, you asked Aylin why he didn't take advantage of those services that were offered, but he already kind of explained that. He was a little bit mad. He was mad at the world. He was mad at the system. He wanted to have nothing more to do with it. But please, Dr. Kai, if you can just take a few minutes to expound upon, the brain development of youth and maybe why things aren't firing quite right at that time.
So as we think about the brain development of individuals, we know that the brain is constantly changing based on whatever sort of stimuli, experiences that individuals experience in their brain responds to it. So say you have a youth that experiences neglect. That part of the brain is not nurtured. So they may have some difficulty with processing, with concentration. They may be more impulsive. They may be misdiagnosed as having ADHD when in fact they're suffering from trauma because of that neglect or that abuse. So anything that happens to you affects your brain development. And as you think about individuals that don't experience trauma, because the brain is constantly developing, we know that you don't experience the full development until about age 24. So even without the trauma, you still don't have those, what we call executive functioning skills, where you can make logical, informed decisions most of the time. So people that have trauma or youth that have trauma have the additional stressor of having the trauma on top of that delayed maturation of the brain. So you can see they can add up to the potential for lots of behaviors that may not be the best behaviors.
That's
and
good.
doesn't, oh, go ahead, Vicki.
I kind of want to bring Sean in on this conversation as well. So the youth that are aging out of foster care, now they're out there on the street. They may get caught up in human trafficking, and you get a call about this. What are the steps? What do you do? What steps do you take to help these youth?
Yeah, so if they call Underground Railroad, the initial process is going to be kind of like talking to them through our helpline and then working on trying to figure out what services they need. They're not going to call us if they're a human trafficking victim and say, hey, I'm a trafficking victim.
Right.
A trafficking victim will never admit they're a trafficking victim because they are not recognizing themselves as a trafficking victim. They might call and say, hey, my partner is abusing me. Hey, I've experienced sexual assault and now I'm seeking services. So when they seek those services, they will be working with our staff to figure out what's going to be best for them. Do they need emergency shelter? If they don't need that, can we set up a meeting with them to meet with a therapist or a counselor to help them start working through some of the stuff that they might have experienced? Do they need housing supports? If they need those things, we have housing advocates who will work with them to try to find housing. Maybe they don't need anything yet, and they're just kind of trying to figure out what they have available to them. And that's something we can do too, is just let them know, like, this is what's available. If at any point you decide you need these services, please feel free to seek us out.
So if someone is at your door and they've got an immediate need of a place to stay, is there something for them at that point in time? How does it work?
Yeah, so our shelter, on like a worst case scenario basis where we have no rooms available, we have like a quick like one night stay kind of situation where we can get them at least, because if they're showing up like in need of emergency shelter and we're full, like we don't want to just like kick them out the door and say, sorry, good luck, you're on your own. So we have like a quick emergency, like one night kind of thing while we work to try to figure out what the next steps are going to be for them. That could be working with the rescue mission to get them into a place over there if they aren't in immediate danger. And if they are, we can connect with other local shelters like Shelter House in Midland or Bay Area Women's Center in Bay City and try to get them into those shelters if they might have space. So we will do our best to work with other shelters in our area to make sure that we are getting them somewhere that they need to be if that's what they want.
Perfect. Thank you.
Dr. Kai, the other question that I have for you is, I've often heard that a barrier to receiving needed services such as medical care, mental health care, so on and so forth, is not only maybe lack of finances, but also lack of insurance. They're underinsured, they're underinsured, or maybe they're on Medicaid. And there's many providers out there that will not take Medicaid. So can you share a little bit about CMU Health and Great Lakes Bay Health Centers and how they are helping individuals that fit in these categories, so to speak?
Yes, Great Lakes Bay Health Center is a federally qualified health center whose mission is to help individuals of all needs, receive services. So they accept all individuals, regardless of the inability to pay. They have a sliding scale if you don't have insurance as well. And they provide lots of necessary services, including physical care, mental health care, case management, transportation assistance, food assistance, you name it, they provide those services. CMU Behavioral Health Clinic is also a clinic operated under CMU's auspices, and we also have a sliding scale, and we do take Medicaid along with other insurances. And then, of course, the community mental health agencies in Saginaw County and every county accept individuals with Medicaid as well. So there are resources available for individuals. It's just a matter of finding out what resources are best for you. So please, any of these 3 agencies, and there are other agencies in the area as well that I did not name that have services for children and adults with Medicaid or without insurance.
Well, I know another agency is the Youth Protection Council. The Youth Protection Council has Sean, help me here. What is the name of the organization that takes in the teens?
Interlink?
Yes,
Interlink?
thank you. My mind just drew a blank. So Interlink, yes. So Interlink will help youth. And I believe these are runaway youth or youth that are just maybe struggling being in the home. And they take in these youth and they can be, I believe, as young as 10. And so that's Interlink in Saginaw, and that's through Youth Protection Council. They also have a teen parent program. So individuals may find themselves expecting a child. They may get, kicked out of the home or embarrassed to go into the home or whatever. And they can go to Teen Parent Services and they can receive they have a home. They can receive other assistance, rides to appointments, so on and so forth. So that's another service. And this is all under the umbrella of the Youth Protection Council. And so we've talked a little bit about runaway youth and how they may end up on various friends or family members' couches. So we call it couch surfing if they're on the streets. And, oftentimes, and Aylin, you can probably address this as well, is trust. If the people, parents, guardians, those closest to you maybe have shattered that trust, that needs to be rebuilt. And I'm just kind of looking for how can we help these youth rebuild trust? And Aylin, you've addressed that sometimes just that kind of peer mentor can be huge.
Mm-hmm. The peer mentor is huge because they're going to bridge that gap. They're going to, a lot of times the youth just don't understand what the role of the person is. They just don't get it. And so when you have a peer support come in and tell them what the role is of the person that they need to trust and reasons why they need to trust this person, that goes a lot farther. Yeah, because most youth are, if you're some kind of a worker or something like that, they're thinking that you're going to take something from them or you're going to do something to them, one or the other.
And that leads me to another question, Sean. If I'm really struggling to trust others and someone befriends me and they offer me support and they show kindness, kind of talk to us about how this plays into, with these youth being so vulnerable, and they're being showing this attention. How can this lead to issues where someone could be trafficked or sexually abused or find themselves in a domestic violence situation? How does that all play in together?
Yeah. So if you're looking at just vulnerabilities to trafficking, is like someone who's experiencing foster is in the foster care system, they're probably experiencing a lot of the other vulnerabilities because we know that being in the foster care system, you have possible increased risk of having substance abuse issues. You're going to have possible mental health problems. You're going to have possibly be experiencing homelessness or poverty. So when you start layering on all of these different vulnerabilities, it's really easy for a trafficker to say, yeah, those are the people I want to target. We have a common misconception where we think that trafficking is someone going to be kidnapped off of the street by some creepy dude in a van and they're going to be sold into sex trafficking. But that's not what the most victims of trafficking will experience. Now, that's the reality for some, but most victims of trafficking end up in trafficking from a family member, a family friend, or a dating partner. Those are the people who that they relied on or trusted the most. And when a trafficker builds that relationship, it's really easy to manipulate them. And if I'm looking for someone who I want to traffic, or if I'm trying to make some money off of it, someone who's experiencing homelessness or poverty, oh, I can just give them a bed to stay in. That's really easy for me. Oh, they are experiencing problems in the home. I'm so sorry your parents treated you that way. I would never do that. They can just start to use those vulnerabilities. And once that person then does have that trust, that's when they start to use them. That's when they'll start to put in those manipulations like, hey, I'm having a hard time now paying bills, but I've got a friend who says they will help us pay our bills off if you have sex with them.
Yeah, Sean, you definitely know what you're talking about. I can see you've been around. And also there's this thing that, and I don't know why they call it this, but they call it survival sex. And it's where the young girls, they're leaving foster care and young guys too, they leave foster care and then they link up with somebody and in exchange for sex. It's not a verbal, hey, I'll give you this for that. It's more like, hey, they link up with somebody and in exchange for, a place to stay, some food, and mainly for the women, especially, is the protection. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's what they're looking for is the protection. We see it a lot too with young people getting involved with gangs. That's where a lot of sex trafficking starts at too. I have a training that I do just specifically for foster youth about human trafficking and why we're so vulnerable. And we talk about in the training, it talks about, when you're on Facebook or Instagram and you're saying, hey, I don't need nobody and I'm good and and I'm this and I'm that and you're kind of putting your stuff out there, you're putting your privacy out there in your life and people are looking at that stuff. These traffickers are looking at that stuff and then they slide into your DM and then it just goes from there. You know, one thing that we see a lot of at River Jordan with our young people is they just link up with anybody. They'll get online and they'll get in. Somebody will slide to their DM and they'll cash out them $10 and and stuff like that. And that's just how it starts. Hey, I understand I've been through that before, and I have parents like that, and I know exactly how you feel. And the next thing you know, there's a relationship going, and then it starts out as hey, that's my boyfriend or my girlfriend, and then next thing you know, they're being trafficked. And Sean, the whole nine. I'm
Yeah.
not telling you nothing new.
But it's even so like even in all of that though is when you have that like that dating relationship piece to it. When someone who's going through the foster care system, there's already for some of them there's already this ability to like unabil unability that's not the right word for that. They're not going to trust people as easily. And once you've experienced then trafficking or abuse in a dating relationship, you now have not only a lack of trust in family, a lack of trust in the system because the system's consistently failed you, and now you have a lack of trust in dating partners. You are really hard pressed to ever trust anybody ever again. So it's why I point out, it's like earlier, it's like we need those lived experience experts working with them because those are going to be the only people that they might trust now. Because every time they tried to trust somebody else, they got kicked down again.
And that is so important, Sean, as we think about trauma and what we do to help treat trauma. You've already said it so many times, you and Aylin, but it's having that relationship with someone that is a nurturing, supportive individual in that individual's life that is there for the long haul. So they can learn that they can trust someone, and they learn how to identify who's the right person to trust. And that's what heals.
Yeah. And it's not related to in terms of like foster care, but it's like when I do a lot of my presentations, especially in like my middle schools and high schools, I make sure to use very inclusive language for everything. And you would be shocked at just by me using that language, how many students are like will come up to me and talk to me is like, I don't know how to tell my parents I'm gay. And it's like, I don't know how to tell my parents I'm experiencing dating abuse. It's like, I'm a guy who is in your class 4 or 5 times max. And you have felt comfortable enough with me to share that information. Is kids are just hurting for someone to be able to just share that they can trust this information with because they're afraid of what's going to happen if the wrong person gets that information.
That is so true.
So, Dr. Kai, how, I just think being a listening ear, being a support system, knowing what resources are available out there to help individuals. There's so many of the resources that we've mentioned this evening, whether it's Underground Railroad, River Jordan, CMU Health, Great Lakes Bay Health, Teen Parent Services, Child Abuse and Neglect, we haven't mentioned, but that's another great organization, Bay Area Women's Center, Shelter House. A quick search is going to give people a lot of information about these organizations. But sometimes individuals maybe they just need a listening ear, somebody that's not going to judge or criticize them, put them down. They just need support and help. And that might be just what it needs, that they take that next step rather than pushing them backwards 10 steps, so can any of you really address how any one of us that is involved in a youth's life, whether they're in foster care or not, can best support these youth?
I'll start off by just taking a stab at it, and then you guys can join in, of course. I think being consistent, letting that individual know that you're there for them, whatever, that you're not there to judge them. You're just there to provide them with support and be that listening ear and the person they can always come to. If they're a foster youth, you may be another surrogate parent for that individual. You may be that person's teacher. You may be their religious person. You may be the neighbor. You may be this person they see in the store. It can be anybody that provides them with that consistency and that nurturing relationship.
And you're both absolutely right, because when you've been in a vulnerable place and you've been hurt so many times and let down by so many different people, whether it's family members, mom, father, other friends, whatever it might be, you really need somebody that you can absolutely trust, that you can confide in. Everybody needs that person that they can go to, that they can completely be totally transparent. And when you don't have that, they tend to keep it within. And if you're holding that kind of stuff within, it is going to mess with your mental state. No doubt about it. Am I right?
Yeah. And Dr. Kai, just kind of speaking to that, you stole mine because I was going to say just being present and show up. Like, you have to show up for them to let them know that you're going to be there for them. Because it's one thing for you to say, yeah, I got you. I'll be there when you need me. When you don't show up, when they do, then they know that they can't trust you now. And especially someone who's experienced trust issues in the past, you saying, oh yeah, I'll be there, and then you're not, your name is off that list. You don't get 3-4 chances with that. You get the one, and if you weren't there, I know I can't trust them, so oh well. And it's just, yeah.
And that can start a domino effect. Because if I can't trust Dr. Kai because she said she'd be there and she wasn't, then I'm not going to trust the next person that says, I'll be there for you. Yeah. It's going to take a lot for me to trust another person, right?
Yeah. And the other thing I'd add to it too, parents who are listening, there's a difference between I love you and I support you. I had been working with someone who had talked to me about how their friend's daughter, who they've showed her and her friend showed all kinds of love to, but her mom didn't show up to her daughter's wedding because she was a lesbian. You can say that you love that love her daughter all you want, but not showing up to that wedding shows that you do not support her. If you say one thing but your actions show something different, it doesn't matter what you're saying. The support isn't there, and people recognize that.
And that is so true, Sean. And I would say that individuals that identify as LGBTQI or A have either higher risk of having adverse outcomes because they have additional stressors. So it's so important with all individuals, but particularly with individuals that identify in that way.
I'd like to add to that, as far as the LGBTQ community, you think that teens have a hard time getting placed in foster homes. When you got both of them things on you, it's almost impossible for a person of LGBTQ to be placed in a foster home. And so that's something that, I know the state is really, that's right in front of them, and something that they're really trying to work hard on doing. But, let's not forget about them.
That is so true, Aylin, and so important.
So based on any of the information that has been discussed this evening, we talked a little bit about the criminal justice system. We talked about youth receiving services across the board, whether it's mental services, medical services, or mental health services. Maybe it's making that transition from foster care to now being on their own, which can be very scary. Even coming from a home where maybe things have been fine, but now all of a sudden it's like, well, you're 18 and it's time to get out on your own now. And so is there anything that any of you would like to expound upon that we haven't really addressed, or you'd like to delve into a little deeper, just to kind of answer maybe any additional questions that might be out there? I'm not really seeing anything in the chat.
I just want to make sure we mention it at some point. Those who are in the foster care system, those who have experienced any kind of form of poverty, have probably also at some point experienced having to commit crimes of poverty. So when you have experienced when you've had to do crimes of poverty in order just to live, and then you start getting that engagement in the criminal justice system where you start to get that record because you're committing crimes just to live, that's also going to make things more difficult for them. So recognizing that sometimes you have to do what you have to do, and if you're given two really bad options, I'm still going to pick a bad option, but I'm going to pick the best option for me in that moment. So if we're not recognizing those things when we're serving those who are in the foster care system, we're doing them a disservice because we're saying, yeah, you made a bad choice, not recognizing that that was the only choice that they really had.
Yeah, and I want to just kind of add to that too. 70% of youth that age out of foster care will be arrested by the age 26, at least once. So there is what we call a foster care to prison pipeline. And that's not the only reason. There's the institutionalization piece of it too, because every time a person is removed and placed into foster care, there's 3 different placements that happen. So, and then you got to count, if the parent relapses, and then they got to go back in, that's another 3, and so the more times that you're being placed, the more you become institutionalized, you get dependent on the system. And that's why I think a lot of youth, when they leave foster care, they don't know what to do, even though life skills and stuff like that are taught to them the best way we can teach it to them. Most of the kids that come to River Jordan, when they leave foster care, I know that they're supposed to get life skills while they're in care. It's part of what the state is paying these agencies to do. But when they come to us, they still don't know how to cook. They still don't know how to clean. They still don't know how to budget. And it's like, why don't you know how to do these things? Well, they're not thinking about those things as they're navigating through foster care. They might be listening to you teach them about, well, not listening. They might be present while you're teaching them how to budget and stuff like that, but they're not really listening. They have a whole lot of trauma going on in their head and stuff like that. So, and by the time you get out, I remember when I went to prison, and I won't make this too long, but when I went to prison, I went to Jackson Quarantine, and at that time, Jackson Quarantine was like prison was in the 50s and the 40s. It was the bars and all that kind of stuff. Was no doors, and I got in there, and it looked like a bird cage. And I was taking showers with all these guys and stuff like that. These community showers and stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, why isn't this bothering me? Why am I not scared out of my wits? And why does it? Well, it's because I was used to being around that kind of environment, and I felt somewhat safe. I knew I was getting 3 meals. I knew I was getting the clothes. It wasn't clothes I liked, but I knew I was getting them. I knew that there was staff there. I knew bills were paid. I just knew all of these things, and and I remember when I first aged out of foster care, I was actually looking for a place that would take care of me. I wasn't looking for, a job or anything like that. Or, I didn't value a job. I didn't understand all that. I just needed to find a place that would take care of me. And I remember, calling 911 and telling them I wanted to kill myself because I knew that the ambulance had to come pick me up and take me to the mental ward. And then that way I'd at least have a place to stay for 21 days, and I still see youth doing that today, that we work with, and that's all part of the institutionalization. And so that's one of the major things that we try to break, as we're working with youth that are navigating through foster care, is just to, get them to start valuing working and all that kind of stuff. We don't want them getting out there and getting on food stamps and getting on all this stuff. There's stuff that they need, like transition health care, which is Medicaid until you turn 26. I mean, you kind of need stuff like that, but we want them to be independent and thrive on their own.
Aylin, once they get out on their own and I don't know if you necessarily graduate from River Jordan, but as they go on, do you follow up with them? Do they come back and tell you how they're doing in life, if life is really working for them the way it should be?
We've had a couple people follow up with us, but we do the following up. I'm always in their business. How you doing, man? I haven't talked to you in a while, and youth don't typically follow up. That's just, and I don't think that's any youth really. It's not a foster care thing. My son's in college. He doesn't call me like, hey, I'm doing okay. I call him, and so we do all of the following up. But yeah, we've had some follow up.
That's good to know. Good to know. I just wanted to kind of know how successful it is for them, how they're doing.
Yeah. And when we hear stuff, it's usually when all hell's breaking loose, and that's okay though. That's perfect. That's because we want them to contact us. We prefer them do it before hell breaks loose, but at least they know where to come when hell breaks loose. Mm-hmm. And they're not isolating themselves. And we've taught them the value of going to their peer and saying, hey, I'm feeling crazy. It's Christmas time. This is trigger season for me. I need somebody, that kind of stuff,
Perfect. Thank you.
And Dr. Kai, I know you addressed this as well, and I'd like to just kind of revisit it because I think it's very important based on what has just been shared with regard to the justice system is when the counselors, the therapist can have a voice as to what's going on in the youth's life, what has led them to this point. I mean, I'm not saying that we need to excuse behaviors, but we need to understand them and we need to get to the root cause so that we can help them and not just, like Aylin said, keep them institutionalized and dependent on everything, the system, so to speak. So I just think it's very, very interesting what you shared about that and how we need to hear from other voices, not just the youth, not just, the probation officer or the foster care worker that says that the child just keeps running away or whatever. We need to understand better what the youth are going through, what they've come from, and what chance do they have to turn things around if we don't offer them some help and support versus just, being imprisoned or juvenile detention or whatever.
And you're right, Crystal. That is absolutely so vitally important. When I worked at the Clinic for Child Study and I looked at the files, I could see that some of these families had been involved with the court for 30 years. Their parents had been in foster care. Their grandparents had been in foster care. And then these children wound up in foster care and then going to juvenile justice. And some of them went to prison. And one of the things I thought about as I worked there is that what are we doing to prevent this from happening? We are not really helping these families to identify the root causes. And so I see that as everyone's goal should be to kind of identify what are those root causes? What causes families to make these difficult decisions, to do crimes of opportunity or crimes of survival? What do we need to change in our systems and our structures to help families thrive and succeed? And I think that by understanding what are some of those root causes, we can find those answers. This is what is going to prevent this family from having generation after generation involved in foster care or in the juvenile justice system. I just want to add, you asked me the question about the emancipation earlier. Actually, the age is 16, not 14. I misspoke, so I apologize for that.
And if I can just ask, Aylin, you talked about wraparound services. I don't know that I fully understand what that means. And I work with Underground Railroad and I'm, I know that we are not an end all do all. So I'm sure that's what you mean. It means that the services that you don't provide, you partner with other agencies that do provide those services. Can you expound on that a little bit more as well?
Yeah, wraparound. I call it wraparound, so I don't give you a laundry list, everything, because there's things that come up, right? So wraparound is like, transportation, helping them overcome transportation barriers. Cold night out, snowing everywhere. You need a ride to work. We'll give you a ride to work if it's available. We got a hygiene pantry at River Jordan. You can come and get some hygiene from us. If you're struggling and you need some groceries and we got some gift cards laying around in the office, we can take you up to Walmart and get you some food. Just stuff like that, just stuff that just not really on paper, So we're talking about like wraparound support. Yeah.
It's the other duties as assigned section in everyone's job description.
Exactly.
Well, you know what? I don't know about the rest of you, but I think this has been an amazing conversation. I hope that much has been learned and that key things that we take away are listen, support, believe. I may not necessarily agree with somebody, but it doesn't mean I can't love them and support them because that's just what we should do. And, so that's my hope tonight. And I hope that There was much learned about other resources available out there, Underground Railroad, River Jordan, many others that were mentioned. I believe that they've been put in the chat as well in the thread. I just thank you all for being present here tonight. I think this has been an invaluable conversation, and it may not end here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And Vicki, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Crystal. I want to thank everybody on the panel tonight as well. Sean Shutt from Community Engagement and Prevention Manager at Underground Railroad. Aylin Stamp, founder and CEO of River Jordan Incorporated. Dr. Kai Anderson, MD, and Crystal Sanders as our host tonight. Did a great job, Crystal. And of course, I also want to thank Alpha Media for their continued support in our community forums, right? So this information is, like Crystal said, very, very valuable. Resources, I always say knowledge is power, right? We've got to have that knowledge. It is power. It's vital to our everyday living. So I appreciate all of you for being on the panel tonight and talking about mental health and foster care, aging out of it. I've learned a lot of information tonight, some good stuff that I had no idea that was going on. So I appreciate each and every one of you. I want to remind everyone who is looking on or maybe just listening. Now, this will also be on our Facebook page for a while, as well as KISS 107 and the other stations as well. So you can always go back and look at this and, here's some of the things that are being talked about. Here's some of the resources that are out there that are available. And of course, you'll see the scroll that's on the bottom of the screen. There's been a lot of different numbers for different resources. And I want to remind you of the 2 events that are going to take place soon. Of course, we have a new event or new program, which is called Dress for Purpose. All right. It'll be the first one on, thank you. Thank you, Nate. The first one is going to take place on October the 17th at 4:30 p.m., 4:30 to 6. It's going to be at the Success Academy, which is located at 1000 Tuscola Street right here in the city. Now, you can join for 8 weeks, all right? 8 weeks. And it's free. You can't get better than free. You're going to be taught how to do cover letters, resumes, interview etiquette, financial literacy, networking, finding employment, mock interviews, and so much more. So there is a reservation form. You can go to womenofcolors.org and you can download that form right there, all right? Or you can simply call the Office of Women of Colors. Also, coming up in November the 11th, as a matter of fact, it will be our Warm a Child for Winter. This is where we give away hundreds and hundreds of coats. And we've been doing this now for about 10 years, all right? We give away these coats. It's a drive-through service. It happens on November the 11th from 9 until 12. All right? So 1000 Tuscola Street. So I don't want you to miss out. So make sure that you are getting your forms. You need to bring that form. So download that form, fill that form out. This is how we provide your child with the coat that they need. We need to know the size, the age, the gender, so that we can take care of that child that is in need of a coat. You will get more than a coat, all right? So make sure you are there and make sure you're there early. It is on a first come, first serve basis. I'll say that again. It's on a first come, first serve basis. You need to be there early. You might have to sit in line for a few minutes, but if you're in need of that coat, it's well worth it, believe me. So Women of Colors, once again, is just loving our community from the inside out. Thank you for listening and good night.